This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on launch of the pilot for retail digital Rupee. The participants are Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, economic analyst, and Gaura Dhawanlal, AIR correspondent. Mr. Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, welcome to the program, sir. Thank you for joining us. The RBI has now, said that a pilot trial of the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, or the digital rupee, to say it in layperson terms, is now coming in. So while most central banks across the globe are exploring the issuance of a CBDC, the key motivations for its issuance are very specific to each country's unique requirement. What do you think is India's need for piloting and introducing the digital rupee?
Quite a bit of chatter in different forms of media about something called a cryptocurrency. Now, obviously, cryptocurrency is something which lots of people have heard about, but very few people understand it, which is fine, because today we are not going to discuss cryptocurrency, but we are discussing what is called the CBDC, or the central bank digital currency, which gets introduced from tomorrow. Now, both cryptocurrency as well as the CBDC both start from the same premise that they are electronic money. What is the difference between them and other financial money ways that we are making payments? We'll come to that shortly. But what we can start off by saying is that cryptocurrency is a currency which has been started by a group of people who think that the current system of money arrangement, where money is issued by the central banks of different countries, is not something that is suiting the world. Now, we can discuss that later, but this means that the cryptocurrency is essentially backed not by any state. No country, excepting El Salvador, has said that cryptocurrency is a legitimate currency. Far less, the central bank of those currencies have not issued it. So, we get the situation is that in any country, wherever there's a cryptocurrency is being traded, you have two currencies. You have the national currencies and then you have the cryptocurrency. Now, this makes it a problem for a person to decide whether to deal in her goods and services when she's buying something, when she's selling something in cryptocurrency or in the currency that is issued as a paper money, as a fiat currency by the central bank of that currency. As you would realize, money depends on its sanctity by the fact that it is recognized and it has got the backing of the government of the country. Whatever government comes along, any country, central bank stands ready to support that currency. This is basically because paper money is an article of faith. It doesn't carry any intrinsic value. Now, if therefore people start having doubts about that faith, then it undermines the entire basis of that currency. The reason why CBDC has come about, and now it's going to start, and it's already started in a pilot form by the RBI this month, and now it's being rolled out in a better form, in larger form. But what happens is that this creates, the cryptocurrency position creates uncertainty, and each person who gets uncertain about the standing of the currency can infect, almost like a virus, an epidemic, other people. And that is to scotch that sort of a problem. The CBDCs have been born because central banks are saying that if we have to have something like an electronic currency, then it should be issued by the respective central banks. So there we have started.
So that the faith is maintained, the trust is maintained.
Yeah.
Moving on from here, sir, when we talk of an article like a paper currency is an article of trust, an article of faith, and it's issued by the government. In terms of how we are going to see it move across. So we did have alternatives. We did have, now a lot of us are making e-payments also. Was there a specific way? Is it going to benefit the retail market or the wholesale market? What are the advantages that this is going to bring in, other than just ensuring that only safe players are now in the market and users have an opportunity or have a safe option too, rather than just going to some private cryptocurrency?
Again, these are very good questions, and it is only over time that we shall see how CBDC's advantages rebound to the advantage of, say, an ordinary person who's getting paid in as a salary or as a payment for any goods or services that she's trading in. Now, that is something for the future, but again, The reason why CBDC is suddenly coming up is, as I say, the trust issue. The second part is that whether there's a substantial advantage that comes from electronic money. Now, electronic money could have been introduced even against the paper currency. What CBDCs do is it puts the Reserve Bank, in our case, the Federal Reserve in USA, in the case of USA, the Bank of England, in the case of UK, and so many others, as the issuer of currency instead of the government of that currency.
Okay.
Does it make a very fundamental change to the lives of the people? No. Does it change the monetary arrangement? Yes, because the currency is going to be issued by the central bank. In other words, people can actually trade in a currency where the sovereign right is being set by the central bank. Now, again, it might seem very esoteric, but it's not actually much if you think that when I buy on an e-commerce platform and that e-commerce platform offers me some bonus or a discount, what is that essentially the e-commerce platform is offering? It is also offering me some sort of a currency, an extra cash. That extra cash is, where is that faith in that cash? That faith in that cash simply remains because I trust that company. So next time I trade with that current company, that company honors me with that cash. It allows me to do some extra purchases. It allows me to trade against something. Here, the central bank is saying, I'll do that in far more greater degree or in far greater measure. So you can see that it is essentially further deepening the people's ability to deal with currency as against earlier forms where, a paper currency, for instance, at best, what it could be done is I pay for something and the person gives me a reward then and there. The person can't defer that reward, can't hold it for future. Because I don't know whether the future the person will be able to give me or not.
Right.
Electronic commerce gives me that advantage that there's a ledger. But that ledger is underwritten by the company which is issuing. In the case of CBDC, here the central bank of the country is issuing such a ledger. It is actually saying that so much of the currency that you are trading is underwritten by me. So you can see that there is a huge advantage that will potentially start coming once more and more people sign up to the value of a CBDC. And to make matters easier for people, the government of India, just like many other countries have said, CBDC and the paper currencies will have exactly the same treatment. People don't need to worry that what is this new currency that I'm getting and what is its relationship vis-a-vis the Indian paper rupee. The government has said for every purpose, it is the same thing.
Okay, so that they're not penny levels, and I think because it's a new, this thing, equally understand, not cluttering the whole system. And I think, Mr. Bhattacharya, that's a very nice analogy or a systematic way you've explained the credit points in e-commerce, because most of us are at the receiving end of such points, in different ways. And
right.
I think, that would make sense to a lot of people like, us who are trying to understand this. Also wanting to understand from you, sir. So why would banks want to do this? What is their incentive in this?
That's a very important point, that why would a bank want to issue CBDC? Well, given the possibilities that are there, and without again getting into a dense monetary discussion, for banks it is not a very good deal. Why? Because banks depend on the paper currency or a form of that paper currency to create more credit. Every time I deposit money in a bank, the bank depends on my relationship with it to say that I'll not immediately withdraw it. And on the strength of that relationship, it gives out loans to people and gives out loans to more and more people, much more than the value of the deposit that I've made. So supposing if I made a 100 rupee deposit, the bank actually ends up giving something like 400 or 500 rupees worth of loan to people on the assumption that everybody will be trading and recovering the money from the bank at different points in future. This role could actually come back to the central bank itself. And this is something which will have to be thought through very carefully, that whether it will be the central bank of the country or the different bank which will be the purveyor of the CBDC. As of now, the rules under which CBDC has been issued make it very clear that CBDC will only be issued by the central bank. So that means that if today I have a CBDC of, say, rupees 100 and I deposit it with, say, State Bank of India, can State Bank of India then give a 500 rupee loan to somebody on the basis of that CBDC? This is something that we shall have to see for the future.
So
it may be able to give, it may not be able to give, because that is a terrain that we'll come to gradually. It is something which may not be apparent to the people at large, that whether the loan is being given against the paper money or is it being given against CBDC. But this is something which banks will be watching with very close observation, very close monitoring to see how it affects the business.
An eagle eye would be what the banks would be keeping on how this is moving. So when we come to the CBDC and the plans to introduce that here, we've seen that there are two types of CBDC that the RBI is wanting to introduce. In fact, one it's already experimented with. So we have the retail and we have the wholesale. Why is there a need to differentiate between the two?
Oh, that's because the wholesale market has got players who are quite aware of what is a CBDC. So it is much more easy to start a business to make them invest through CBDC. For instance, they are investing in bonds. And right now in that market, when they invest in bonds, typically there's a counterparty issue. I mean, there are technical parts to it which CBDC gives them an advantage. But more than that, what happens is all the players there, a bank, a clearing corporation, an issuer of debt, these people all understand the CBDC very deeply. Okay. A retail person will obviously not be familiar. Some may be familiar, lots may not be familiar. So before we sort of set out CBDC as a currency that is available in the public, it's important that the CBDC is made and sort of proof-checked about its utility in the whole market, which is why it's basically now being used only in the wholesale market.
And what has been the impact so far in the wholesale market?
It's been very good, because what happens is that the bonds that are being sold in the wholesale market, the banks get an arbitrage advantage. Now, how it happens, something let's leave it for some other more detailed time, right, because that's something that we'll need to show how a government bond is priced. But it definitely does create some sort of a monetary advantage for the banks, which they can definitely push back into their profit lines. Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier, there is a possibility that, it's going to benefit the consumer, the retail consumer, more than maybe the banks. It may not be so advantageous to the banks in the retail segment. And of course, transaction costs, you're saying, are likely to, virtually vanish and things like that. But so do you think that for the retail consumer, it can only be an alternative, right? Because if the net is down and the e-wallet is corrupted, because somewhere I think this whole thing of having physical money versus doing e-transactions, we are somewhere transcending that, and e-transactions
what
are
happens
moving
is,
up.
as we move through technological hoops, the advantages start coming along. Because what happens is that now you'll have much more fidelity on how the rupee notes are issued. You can't have breakdowns. So there'll be lots of other technological advances which will happen to make almost totally wipe out the possibility that, corrupting of the e-commerce, of the e-wallets, to remove the teething problems of not being able to get internet connectivity. Lots of those things will not be possible to keep when CBDC comes in. So which means that the system's fidelity will have to be raised up several times to be able to handle CBDC. So I don't think that is something which we need to be particularly worried about. It's something that changes, and at one stage we never thought that mobiles can be used when you're traveling across cities. But the systems took care to develop a mobile system that goes across countries, and even in airplanes now. So yes, those things will be taken care of as as use becomes more widespread and the demand of the people becomes much more intense and deeper.
And I think we're talking of many years ago we said, and we were told that the world is getting flatter, we're getting more connected. This, you feel that despite the risks and the hiccups that might come in the way, this is still the way to go?
Absolutely. This is the way to go. And remember, there's a new technology. So which is why, but the advantage of this technology is that it's not being introduced by a random person. It's something, because it is such a fundamental thing, a very fundamental part of the world, of anybody, of the entire economy, of any country, of the world, is being introduced in a calibrated way by the governments and with every possible safeguard option. And I do not expect that the CBDC to create any hiccups for the world at any stage. Rather, very soon we'll suddenly find that, yes, we have become so accustomed to it that paper currencies will, or even the idea that there was to be two forms of currency, a note, notionally a paper,
mm-hmm.
and a CBDC will have vanished.
Well, thank you, sir. That's a lovely optimistic note to conclude our program. Mr. Subhamoy Bhattacharjee, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on launch of the pilot for retail digital rupee. The participants were Subhamoy Bhattacharjee, economic analyst, and Gaura Dhawanlal, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.